Welcome to this special interview. I'm with my good friend, Matthew Warner. He is the author of a brand new book, which has just been published by Word on Fire. Get it in the screen there. It's titled, Why They Follow, Lessons in Church Communication from That One Lost Sheep. I've known Matt for many, many years. He's a dear friend of mine. We've spoken at conferences together. We've written books together, but he's probably best known in the Catholic world as the founder and CEO of Flocknote. Flocknote is an innovative communication, membership management, and online giving software tool that is used by over 10,000 churches and communities, schools, dioceses, parishes, all to help them better connect with their flocks. Matt is on a mission to help the church communicate better. He spent the last 20 years of his life on pastoral councils, leading ministries, traveling all over the country, speaking to thousands of church leaders. He's podcasted, blogs, written books, everything. He's done all of that to, again, help the church engage with more people. He has a great blog and website, which you could find at backtothehome.com. I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. And his first book, which was published before this one, is titled Messy and Foolish, How to Make a Mess, Be a Fool, and Evangelize the World. That was published by Matthew Kelly's Dynamic Catholic Organization. Matt and his wife, Lauren, and their 6 kids hang their hats in Texas. But again, Matt's here today not to talk about all that other exciting stuff, but particularly this brand new book from Word on Fire. So Matt, it's good to have you. We're excited about the book and welcome.
Yeah, it's so great to be here, Brandon. Been a huge fan of Bishop Barron for a long time, friends with you for a long time. So this is a dream come true to actually be on the show with you.
We're excited about it. Word on Fire has partnered with Flocknote on several projects over the years. We have the Word on Fire Engage offering where we were sending Bishop Barron's films and emails through Flocknote to parishes. I know thousands of parishes were taking advantage of that. But what you've done in this new book is sort of distilled all the principles that you've learned over the years, again, working with 10,000 plus parishes, schools, dioceses, probably 100,000 plus parish leaders. So let me start with a basic question, namely, why this book? Why now? What prompted you to put this book together?
We know our leaders need to be solid in their theology, their moral teaching, their liturgy, pastoral ministry, discipleship. We give them all kinds of training and put emphasis on these things, and we should. But we forget, I think, that if we want them to be effective leaders in all of those things, if we want them to be able to wield all of those skills and wisdom and that they've acquired, they also have to be great communicators. And I think our leaders, volunteers, all the way up to our priests, our pastors, our people at the diocese, bishops, don't often get a lot of training in communication and leadership. And the church needs great communicators, and this book will teach you to be one. I think that when we were started early on in Flocknote, we created this tool it was very powerful. It would help churches communicate more effectively and help leaders do the same. And what we learned is that you can't just give someone a tool, that they also need to be able to use it well. And so we started collecting a lot of these best practices we saw people who used it really well. We saw people who struggled with certain things, and we're trying to help them. And so we thought it would be really helpful, and we really wanted to give this for many years now. We've wanted to give this to our all of our customers that use Flocknote to help them become better communicators. And so it's been a labor of love. It's taken a long time, and it's been years and years of collecting these best practices. And finally, the opportunity to put it all together into a book and publish it, we're really excited.
Now, I know a lot of people watching this are already familiar with Flocknote. Maybe their parish, their school, their diocese already use Flocknote. But I want to emphasize that this book is not only for users of Flocknote. It's not just a how-to guide for Flocknote communities. Again, this is meant to help any church leader to become a better communicator and a better leader. Again, the title's Why They Follow. I want to talk about the structure of the book. It's arranged in 2 parts. The first part, you share a lot of general principles that will guide the leadership and communication framework for organizations. And then in the second part, you have a lot of practical tips and recommendations. So I thought we could walk through each of those 2 parts together and dip in here and there. There's so much stuff in this book. I mean, I wish everybody would buy it and take to heart every single recommendation you have in there. But let's give a 30,000 foot overview of some of the stuff in there. In the general principles section, you tell people that it's not enough just to have a good message, that we should consider more than just what you say to people. And I know this is a struggle for a lot of Catholics who think we have the greatest message of all. We have the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's enough, right? But why isn't that enough?
Well, I think that gets to the heart of what it really means to communicate something, which is not just to say something. Saying something is different than actually having communicated it to somebody. And if we look at the root of the word communicate, it means to share in common. So to share in common with somebody. So it's not just saying something, putting out into the world and saying, hey, I've communicated. It's no, you've said it, but if it's been communicated, it means that it's been received successfully on the other side in some way, so that you actually share it in common. That's what it means to communicate. And of course, that is at the heart of the mission of the church, is to bring about communion with God and communion with each other. So communion comes from communicating, to share it in common. And so again, I think of communication as this sort of linchpin skill that all of our leaders need to have, whether you're a volunteer all the way up to the top, that if you want to be able to wield all your other skills, communicating is at the heart of what we do. It's at the heart of what it means to share the good news. To share it in common with somebody means to have communicated it with them. So if we really care about the message being received on the other side, then we have to think about all the other things that come into play when we talk about really communicating something with somebody. And it's more than just the words we say or the message that we want to give them. There's all these other things along the way. And the book goes into all the different layers of this. But just to give you an example, so if you think about one dimension of communication is that it is limited by the person's capacity to receive that message on the other side. So I like to compare this to like God's way of giving us grace, right? God is always pouring out grace freely. He gives us grace freely. It's just dumping down on top of us constantly. But what's limited is not God's capacity to give us grace, but our capacity to receive that grace. So our willingness to open ourselves up, to make room in our lives, and to dispose ourselves in a way to receive it, right? And make use of it in some good way. That's our task. And it's the same with communication, that we can give people these messages. We can pepper them with the message over and over again. But if they're not disposed to receive it in a successful way, we're just going to keep talking past each other, which is what you see in most of the conversations today. If you look online, if you look at so many of the efforts out there and the conflicts and the debates, you see people talking past each other, misunderstanding each other, coming at it from completely different perspectives. And so, I think one of the chapters in the book is called Cultivating Soil. And it's exactly this concept. They take the parable of the sower where they cast seeds. But if you're a farmer, if you've ever planted something, you know that the easiest part is putting the seeds in the ground. The hardest work is actually cultivating the soil and getting it ready. And that's the key to whether you're the most successful or not, is how well have you cultivated the soil. And so it's a great metaphor for communication, that we have to work on cultivating the soil, the place that the seeds are going to land, whether they're going to bear fruit or not. And sure, there's an element of our evangelizing where we're going to cast seeds, and sometimes they're going to fall on rocky soil, and sometimes they fall on the path and they don't take root. And that's okay. That's part of what we do. But if we really care about the message being received, then we should work on cultivating that soil. So when it comes to communication, that's building really great relationships with people first. That's working to expand their imagination. It's shifting their worldview and doing things specifically to help them shift that worldview so they can receive that message more successfully. It's working to build trust and through our witness, and build our credibility as a leader or as a communicator so that they're more open to listening to what we have to say. So there's all these other layers to communicating other than just saying the message.
I like that sower example, because you can imagine a lot of parishes today, if they were living out Jesus's parable of the sower and thinking, how can we come up with a new technology to spread even more seeds, or spread them even further, or what type of seed, or how can we manipulate all that? But to your point, none of that matters if the soil hasn't been cultivated. None of that's going to be received, and you could waste all your time, spin all your wheels on all these secondary concerns.
That's right. And when you look at, again, you're given all these great tools for shooting seeds all over the world, right? for lack of a better way to put it. So this communication technology lets you do all that. What it doesn't do a great job often is cultivating soil, or we don't often use them that way, even though we could be. And so I think absolutely, you got to think about it on all these other layers.
think one of the most important parts of your book, it's in that first section on guiding principles. You talk about the need to articulate a big vision for your church, your school, your organization, the why behind everything else that we do. And you make the observation that so many organizations, again, spin their wheels on secondary concerns. I'm going to quote you here. You write, quite frankly, we don't really need to tweak our newsletter, start a new program, form a committee, upgrade our technology. What we need is to rediscover our large purpose and then communicate it, reminding our flocks that the world has indeed been thrown off balance and that each of them is needed in this grand story. How can churches better do that, better communicate this big vision?
Yeah, the book is organized that way on purpose. The first part of the book really focuses on these fundamental principles, and the second has a lot of these sort of best practices put into, more practical ways of helping you do things. And like you said, not Flocknote specific at all. This is for any communicator. But the reason I put such an emphasis on these fundamentals is because I do think that while those techniques, having a great newsletter, having those new programs, having the committee, getting the right technology, those things are important. But they're only important if you get the fundamentals right first. And I think the reason I kind of say, quite frankly, we don't need to focus on that stuff right now. What we need to focus on is rediscovering this large purpose and communicating it, is because I think it helps. It's the sort of the biggest factor in whether we're successful with all the other things. And so we dig into that a little bit, and it's more than a lot of parishes, dioceses, they have a mission statement, or ministry has a mission statement. And then you have kind of your daily tasks that you do every day. And I think we don't often connect them together very well. And what we need is something in between those two things. So the mission statement's normally pretty vague in most cases. It's not like, okay, did we achieve the mission? It's not all that clear. Have we achieved it? What will it look like when we've achieved it? It's not very concrete, right? And then you have your daily tasks, which are often sometimes disconnected. They kind of maintenance things. They're like, I think this is what I should do. But I think what's missing so often is what's in the middle, which is good goals, and particularly like good big goals. And I think that's missing in a lot of communities today. And I think that's what helps bring the mission statement to life. It's what grips the imagination of people. It lets them know, okay, that's what it means to go do that mission. That's what that looks like. That's how long it might take us to achieve some big chunk of it, right, in some way. And so that's actually something, we have a free short course that goes along with the book that anyone can do for free on the website on how to make good goals, how to set good goals for your ministry or your church. And it's really important because it gives fundamental to why somebody follows any leader is, do they want to go where you're going, right? Kind of a straightforward thing. If someone's going to follow you, well, where are they following you to? And the big goal is like concrete vision for them that they can see, that's where I'm going. That's what I want. That's what I care about achieving. That's the meaningful thing we're going to do in the world together. And then but that has to be communicated. So this is a goal it might be a year goal, but usually this is like a 3 to 10 year goal, something big. It's concrete, it's meaningful. Your people care if you achieve it or not. There's something big that weighs in the balance. It matters whether we achieve this. If we don't achieve this, it's going to be bad because of why. We can tell people. If we do achieve it, here's all the great things that are going to happen in the world. And when you clearly communicate something like that and people care about it, it's amazing the kind of momentum you get. It's the kind of engagement you get and support you get of people who want to go achieve that thing. But when it remains sort of a vague aspiration, people don't engage at all. And I think that's a big gap in a lot of church communication.
Well, again, I'm talking here with Matthew Warner. He is the author of a brand new book for Word on Fire titled Why They Follow: Lessons in Church Communication from That One Lost Sheep. You can find out more about the book at the website wordonfire.org/follow. I'll include a link to that below. And here's something really special we're doing. We're offering the book for sale as an individual book, and I expect a lot of people will get it and benefit from it. But we're especially trying to get this book into parishes. And so we're offering a special package where you can get 10 copies of the book for $99 with free shipping. So it's less than $10 a book. The idea is that you get this with your parish staff, with your diocesan staff, with your school or organization leadership group, and read it and go through it together. I can't think of a better investment of your money and time than going through these principles together. The return on investment will be enormous because it'll help your organization to communicate all the good things you do better. It's like pouring gasoline on the fire. So again, check it out, wordonfire.org/follow. All right, I want to talk about technology. I've been a part of a lot of parishes, you have as well, and there's often a temptation to think that technology is always good. The more, the better. I just use the gasoline on fire analogy. I think a lot of Catholic leaders see technology that way. It just makes everything better. But in your book, you express a more nuanced view toward technology. So, how should parishes, diocese schools approach technology?
You and I have talked about this for many years in various levels and angles, areas of life, all those kinds of things. And this is one I'm very passionate about. I spent a lot of time thinking about where technology fits with our lives in a holy, happy way, both personally in parishes. Obviously, I started a technology company. And so I've grappled with these things in a lot of ways. And I think it is important to realize that it's not all good. It's not all bad. More technology doesn't necessarily mean better. Progress is not always, what does that mean to progress? Progress toward what? We have this bias toward new things today that we assume that anything newer is always better. And that's just not the case. And we really have to be more intentional with how we do it. But to answer your question, I would say first for parishes is to realize that technology is not a magic fix. Like we said, there's going to be a lot more fundamental issues that need to be addressed. The problem is very urgent, actually, and I outlined some of the latest stats in the book. We've all heard the numbers of people drifting away from the church in sort of large numbers, but it feels to us like it's a gradual thing. But when you put it on a chart and you look at it, it is dramatically collapsing, the number of people who call themselves Christian in the United States. And it's not just collapsing, like it's not only collapsing, but it's collapsing at a faster and faster rate. And with younger people, it's happening even faster. So we're in the middle of a very dramatic collapse in how many people call themselves Christian and how many people practice their faith. And some technology or tool or tweak to our technique or something is not going to change that. Those make little adjustments up and down depending on how we use those things. The fundamental issues is what we have to get right if we have a chance of reversing this dramatic collapse. So that's the first thing, is to not think that technology is going to fix the main problems we have. Second, I think technology can be a bit of a trap, a crutch, a distraction, a procrastination. It can even be counterproductive if you don't fix those fundamentals first. So sometimes we're like, well, let's go ahead and do the technology anyway because we know we need to do it. But a lot of times we're not doing it with the intention it deserves. And we end up doing it sort of, again, as a crutch. It makes us feel like we're making progress on something easy or that it's some sort of shortcut. And so it actually keeps us from focusing on or fixing the underlying things that need to be fixed first. But we've also seen that when you give someone a powerful tool, if they haven't been taught how to use it well, you can actually do more damage than good. So we've seen, again, it's a correlation. How much is causation, I don't know. But the more the church has adopted these things, the faster people have left the church, right? So I've seen it happen where if you're not communicating a message that's very compelling yet, and you haven't figured out how to tap into what people really want and connect it with the church's needs and mission, then people end up getting driven away faster because they just learn more quickly that I'm not interested in what you're talking about. And so we do have to be careful. And it gives us this tendency where, again, if you have a hammer, everything kind of looks like a nail. And if the hammer is all this technology, it's like every problem we have, it's like, let's throw some technology at it and see if we can make it better. So I say all that because I try in the book to help the reader avoid the temptation to kind of skip to the technology, skip to the shortcuts, skip to some of the hacks you could read about online of how to get better open rates or how to get more people engaged or watching your videos or whatever that thing is, because I think it's a big distraction. And I think it causes a lot of bad practices when it comes to even using those tools in the first place. So a lot of the churches approached the internet as like it's this new big megaphone. So there's a lot of shortcuts we think we can take. We think that like this is another place we can just blast out more information, but that's not what the power of the internet really is. The power of the internet is its network connectivity. So it's how quickly something that's valuable can spread. That's the real power of it. And so it's not like how many things can we shout in the most different places. It's what can you whisper that will spread? Because if it's valuable, it will go, it will spread. And that's the power of the internet today. So that's an example of one misconception a lot of people have as they approach a lot of the technology and the new media. But of course, we end up with these sort of meaningless goals in the middle of like, we want to reach people or we want to engage people, but we don't actually know what we want to reach them to achieve because we haven't clarified our goals, for instance, or like what our big mission is or what our big goals are to reach our mission. Or we want to engage people, but we don't really know, again, why are we engaging them? What's the goal with them? So engagement, reaching people, those are not ends in themselves. Those are a means to some other end, and we have to clarify that goal first. So the big key is to be intentional with it. You have to back up and say, what's our big goal? Now, what's our little short-term goals? Now, who do we want to reach? How do we want them to how do we want them to be changed? And then you can say, okay, well, which technology might help us do that in the best way possible? And so getting that order right is really really important. And I just want to say also, I think there's this is another theme in the book that because of the way the internet is connected all of us through technology and made everybody so present, the temptation to sort of go reach all these people all out there on the internet is really strong. And that's sort of I think another shortcut that we can be tempted to take when speaking particularly here of the local church. So if you work at a local ministry, there's this temptation to think that like the people we need to reach are all out there somewhere on the internet. I need to go find them on some different website or social network or whatever. But most of them are sitting in the pews still, at least sometimes. They're somehow connected to your church. They're showing up sometimes. They're there in person sometimes. You have a way to reach them directly because they're in your database or whatever. That's where we should be starting is in reaching those people that are sitting right in front of us. So if we want kindling to start a big fire, raging ministry, then the kindling's right there in the pews. And too often, but that's the hard kindling. That's the stuff that's the I got to go build personal relationships and do the hard work of like dealing with real life people rather than these theoretical people out on the internet that are going to click and watch my video and maybe be changed by it. So again, not that the church doesn't need that kind of ministry on some level, but particularly with local church leaders and ministry leaders, the focus should be on the people there in front of you, not wandering around somewhere on the internet.
I remember maybe a decade ago, you and I were traveling around conferences, speaking to parishes and dioceses, and Facebook was kind of new on the scene. It was tempting for a lot of parishes to just rush out and create a Facebook page just because they felt it was obligatory. That was what everybody was doing, every organization. And then they would marvel at how many likes they got on their Facebook page and brag about, we have 5,000 followers on Facebook. But it calls to mind the title of your book, Why They Follow. One of the distinctions you make in your book is between a genuine follower, someone who's really following your leadership, your vision, where you're taking this organization, and mere members or onlookers or participants, right? You say in the book that if you're always begging for somebody's attention, they aren't really a follower. Just because you have somebody's email address or their phone number, that does not make them a follower. And I would add, just because they've liked you on Facebook, follow you on Instagram or TikTok, doesn't necessarily mean that they're a genuine follower. So how do we cultivate genuine followers?
Like you said, that's really the heart of the question of the entire book and what we do there, because it starts with understanding why people follow any leader. Do they want to go where you're going? And do they believe that you can get them there as their leader? So that's why somebody follows you. Do they want to go where you're going? And do they believe that you can get them there? And so you first have to be able to tell people where you're going. And it really is that straightforward. So I think if you ask a lot of leaders, where are you going? Where are you leading your people? And we can all kind of say, yeah, I'm leading them to heaven, I hope, right? Well, that's good, but what does that mean? That's where the big goals come into play. So having something that's concrete that you're trying to achieve as a group is really critical to getting people engaged and getting them actually following you to go somewhere meaningful. And so, like you said, begging for someone's attention. If Facebook says they're a follower, they're in our database, we have their contact info, that doesn't mean they're following you anywhere. And that's a sort of underlying question is, well, what metrics really matter? Because a lot of times we can chase those kind of metrics. We want to get people more people on our email list or more people on our Facebook page or more people visiting our website. But what does that really mean? What is it? Is it really achieving what we wanted to achieve? Well, again, you have to back up and say, well, what was our goal? What are we trying to build? What is the concrete thing in this world that we're trying to do together with this group of people? And so you have to get clear about that first. I know I'm being repetitive here, but that really is fundamental to whether somebody's going to follow you anywhere. And then you have to be clear about what's at stake. So you have to communicate the clear goal, but you have to communicate why that matters. Does it matter to people? Is it a big thing? Is it a big deal if we do this, or is it not a big deal if we do this? So I'll give you a quick example. So it's kind of common. I'll hear like the parish or the diocese might be saying, hey, we need to raise more money for seminarians. So they ask for money for seminarians. But in that statement, like, hey, please support our seminarians, I don't know what's at stake, right? It's like, how much more do you need? What happens if you raise the money? What happens if you don't raise the money? Does something bad happen, or does we just kind of keep going like we're going? Does it really matter? So if you rephrase that and said instead, like, if we don't raise $150,000 in the next 2 months, then 3 seminarians are going to have to go home and apply again next year because we don't have the money this year. Now you've clearly communicated that something important is at stake. And you can see clearly what's going to happen if we hit the goal, what's not going to happen, or if we don't hit the goal. And so that's a very simple example, but that's missing from most of our requests. Most of our things we're trying to do with our group of people is what's at stake and does it matter? Because when you clearly tell people what's at stake, all of a sudden people are like, okay, well, that's important to me. I'm going to help figure out how it's going to happen. And people come together to make it happen. But if it's left vague and we don't really know, or it doesn't really matter that much to me, then I don't. And it really is that simple. That you look at the things that people are super engaged with around, in our culture. It's not that people are just apathetic about everything. You see people super engaged, really energetic, willing to put a lot of, donate money, time. They spend hours reading about it every day. It could be something fairly, somewhat trivial, like a movie series or something, right? Something they really care about, though. But for whatever reason, that matters to them a lot, right? But there's also really important things, like you might take politics or something like that. You see people get super engaged, but what's happened is those politicians, again, whether they're telling the truth or not is a separate question, but they've communicated that something big is at stake. So it's like, if we don't win this election, the country's going to be set back 100 years or whatever the case is. And people go, I'm not going to let that happen. And so I'm willing to put my time, my energy, my money. I'm going to debate every person I see on this topic that believes different, whatever the case is. They're fired up about it. And that's what we're missing in a lot of what we're doing in the church. It reminds me a lot of C.S. Lewis quote where it said of Christianity is either of no importance or of infinite importance. And the one thing it can't be is moderately important. And I think when you listen to a lot of the communications, you walk into a lot of our churches, it all feels often a little moderately important. And I think to me, that says almost everything. If it's moderately important that we achieve this, if it's moderately important that when I leave high school and go off to college that I practice my faith and go to mass, if it's moderately important when I have kids that I get them the sacraments or not, or we go to mass on Sunday, then people generally won't do it. There are too many things in the world that have been communicated to them as being really, really important, that there's no time for moderately important things. We just aren't going to do it. And so I think that if the truth, though, is that our parishes do have really important, infinitely important things that we're doing. We just don't often communicate that very well. And so I think figuring out how to formulate that message better, to clarify where you're leading them and make it concrete, to communicate clearly what's at stake, and to communicate in a way that breaks through whatever barriers that people have that you're trying to reach, all of a sudden things start to move. And once you're able to do that, engagement becomes easy, raising money becomes fun, and all these other sort of problems we have trying to get people to pay attention to us go away.
I want to get back to something you mentioned just a few minutes ago when we were talking about technology. You said that parishes should avoid the temptation to go chase anonymous people online, to draw anonymous people to our Facebook page or to our website, or to subscribe to our email list, and instead to focus on the disengaged people within our own pews. You have some pretty harrowing statistics in your book about that. You note that on average, about 7% of parishioners in a given parish are what we might describe as engaged. They're actively involved, they volunteer, they're part of small groups, they show up at Mass every Sunday. Yet, I think it's no surprise to listeners and viewers of this that most of what we do in parishes is aimed at that 7%, the 7% who show up and are already involved with everything. We have a much greater difficulty reaching and engaging the 93% of people in our parishes that are maybe on the fence, disengaged to various degrees. So what do you recommend? How can churches begin to better reach the disengaged?
Starts with recognizing that our view of things is probably skewed. Even if we spend a lot of time with some of our parishioners, we may feel like I have a good sense of what's happening here. I have a good sense of what people care about or they're concerned about, but we do have it's probably a very skewed view of that 7% bubble. And so, because most of the feedback we get, most of the complaints, the praises, the requests, the people participating, the people we're subconsciously trying to please, whatever the case are in that 7% bubble. They're the ones that are already engaged in doing things with us on a regular basis. And so we're naturally going to have a bias toward doing the kind of things that make them happy and speaking the language that resonates with them. So we have to intentionally break out of that, both in our listening. So we need to go out and make sure we're listening to people and getting to know people and building relationships with people that are outside that bubble. But we also need to intentionally communicate outside of that bubble as well and do when we plan events and programming and the language we use, be intentional about breaking outside of that bubble as well. The second thing is something I said earlier, that the most of that 93% are still in the pews on Sunday sometimes. They're not, some of them are there every Sunday. Most of them are not there every Sunday, but they're there every couple of weeks, once a month. They're there at Christmas and Easter. So they're there sometimes. And so I think that those are huge opportunities we need to be taking advantage of as leaders, is when they do show up, what are we doing? What are we doing to get them leaning in rather than drifting out? What are we saying to them that taps into something they care about and that they're passionate about to get them moving with us and toward our goals? So that's, again, it's not some task of like, well, where are all these people? They're right there in front of you. And they're giving you at least some attention right now. It may not be very much, but they're giving you some, which is huge. So we need to take advantage of that opportunity. So the book goes into how to do that a little bit better as well. And I think tapping into those 93%, and I often call them the 82% in the book, because there's actually 11% that have stopped showing up altogether, although I think that number is bigger now. And so there's that 82% that still show up, they're still there, but they're not fully engaged yet, and they're drifting out. But I think that, the 7%, God bless them. I'm one of them. I love them. Most of my friends are them, right? But we're going to be there no matter what. We're there whether it's bad, whether it's good, whether the leaders are great, whether the homilies are awesome, or whether they're terrible, whatever. Like, we're there. We're there. And I think that I'm convinced that what's missing is what I've harped on most of this interview, is that sort of, what are we doing that's meaningful? What are we doing that people are going to care about? What's a big goal that we would all get behind and work on together? Because I think those people in the pews are hungry for something like that. They're hungry for a challenge. They're hungry to put their skills to use. They're hungry to make their life more meaningful. They're hungry to achieve something together as a group. And they're just waiting for it. And we're not giving them quite the opportunities to do it. And the thing is, parishes are doing a lot of these things. They're doing beautiful, amazing work. We just often aren't communicating it that well. We're not telling people what we're doing. We assume people already know it, because again, the 7% already know it. So like, all my friends already know we're doing these things. So why would I keep repeating myself when these people already know it? But most of those people sitting in the pews don't know it, and they don't understand how meaningful it is, and they don't understand the impact that it's making to your community or to the lives of the people that you're ministering to. So we have to get better at communicating it and telling people about it, so that those people can get engaged in the opportunity to be a part of the mission as well.
Let's talk a little bit about the second half of your book, where you have all of the practical strategies, tips, recommendations. There's a lot in here. I remember flipping through each page and be like, oh, that's awesome. Underline that, star that, put a note next to that one. So there's no way we'll have time to cover all of them, but I picked a few that I thought would be good for us to cover. One of the lines that really stuck out to me was you said, after years and years at Flocknote, helping churches improve communication and exploring many different communication technologies in the process, we continually come back to two channels that stood head and shoulders above the rest, which naturally raises the question, what are those two channels and why are they so effective?
The two channels are texting and email. And some people will say, well, you're just saying that because that's what Flocknote does. We specialize in helping, churches manage their texting and email lists and all that. But it's actually the other way around. The reason Flocknote does that now is because for years and years, we played around with all these different channels and trying to figure out what was going to be most effective, what was most practical, what really moved the needle, what really got things done. And it always came back to texting and email. And there's a number of reasons that's the case. So the first is that's like people's new home address, right? That's the address that doesn't change for most of their life anymore. It's where they get their most important and intimate messages from their most intimate, close relationships. It's where it's how they access every other important thing in their life, whether it's a social media network or their bank account or whatever. So it's their phone, their mobile phone number, and their email address now do all of that. So they're central to all these other things. But second, it's the most direct, it's the most immediate. You get far and away the best open rates out of any channels out there. It's the least things for the recipient to do. Like they just receive it. They're already checking that channel. They don't have to go log in somewhere. They don't have to download an app. They don't have to be using a particular platform, whatever. It avoids all the filters and censorship that happens now on a lot of these other platforms. So again, like trying to get your message out on most social media platforms now is very, very difficult because it's filtered through all the different things. There's so much content on there. And so they're having to prioritize it and then of course sometimes censor things that are like, hey, we don't think this is right, or hey, this is against our policy, or this is hate speech or whatever. And so which kind of makes my last point, which is that it's platform independent. So if you are on a platform that they decide, hey, what you believe and what you do is hate speech and we're shutting you down, you can't reach people anymore on that platform. With email and texting and mobile phone numbers, it's totally platform independent. So you can take that information, you can use it in any number of different of tools. You can use it personally on your phone. There's lots of different ways you can take that information. So you build this way to connect with all your people, and you can take that and use it in so many different ways. So I think it's just smart. I think they're the most effective, and I think they're often overlooked because they feel, like we said at the top, new technology always feels better, and texting and email feels like old technology compared to a lot of the stuff today. And it's just not true. They're really still the most effective. And honestly, you can do most of the things you need to do. If you are doing something meaningful, if you have a group of people that consider themselves part of your tribe and they want to do whatever task it is that you're doing together, they care about what's at stake and they want to achieve the big goal, you can pretty much do it with texting and email. You don't need hardly anything else to go with it, usually. It just depends on the situation. But it's amazing what you can achieve with those two simple channels.
I think a lot of reasons people jump to some of these other new and alluring tools is they think, well, I tried texting and emailing and it didn't work. And usually the problem's not with the tool, it's with how they're using it, which is where your book comes in. You offer lots of practical advice on how to use email and texting better among many other communication tools. One of the bits of advice you offer, which I love because of how provocative it is, you say, delete 80% of your next message. What do you mean by that?
Blaise Pascal said, that's one of my favorite quotes. It says, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. And I think it summarizes so much of church communication. I mean, communication in general, right? Because it does take more time and effort to make something short and to the point and to really capture the essence of what it is I want to communicate. And it's a lot easier for me to just ramble on and just keep adding things. And, oh, yeah, I want you to know this, and I want you to know this, and I want you to know this. And unfortunately, that just does not work in today's highly competitive communication environment, where there are lots of finely tuned, high value packed messages flying at people all day long. And so if your message comes in and the ratio of like content to value is really low, that like there's only a little bit in here that's really worth my time, but there's a lot of stuff I have to dig through, it just doesn't get read. And so it's really a fundamental habit we need to build for all leaders and communicators is getting to the point more quickly And this is just a fun technique to help you do that. So if you write something and then you say, what if I had to cut 80% of this out? Your first thought is there's no way. People have to know this, they have to know this. But what if you had to? If you really had to, and it's amazing when you do this and you cut it down to the 20% that you think is really the most important, and you have to prioritize it. And then you look at it at the end, you go, wow, that is actually really good. And way more people are going to read that. And that if everyone gets that point, I will be really happy. And you can link to the other information, you can put it down somewhere else, but you often don't miss it. It's a fun technique because you get attached to what you write, you get attached to your own ideas. Anyone who writes has to sort of get used to this, that you think it's probably more important than they will. And so cutting all this out really helps you get through all of that. And again, after you cut it all out, you often don't miss it at all. And it makes your communicating way better. And it really trains people in that habit that when I get a message from you, it's gonna be packed with value. It's gonna be worth my time because you've done the hard work of cutting it down to something short and sweet, and that always is worth my time to read.
One major challenge facing a lot of parishes, dioceses, schools, nonprofits today is asking for money. That's also always the thing that causes people to break out in hives and worries and anxieties. Thankfully, you have a whole chapter in your book on that topic, full of really good practical tips and advice that have been used by organizations to raise tens of millions of dollars over the years. I think it's going to be one of the most helpful chapters for most organizations. What would you say most organizations do wrong when it comes to raising money, and what should they do instead?
I think that they're often asking for money before they've earned the right to ask. And what I mean by that is they haven't done all the hard work of actually enrolling people in the cause, getting them to care about the cause and what we're trying to do first. And again, it comes back to the big goal. Do they care about it or not? I think one of the reasons fundraising, development departments is such a hard slog for them to try to ask for money. It's like they're just continuing to scrape at the bottom of the barrel of like sending, just, can we get more contacts? Because we know that we can get 1% of them to respond with a little bit of something. And you're just finding all these sort of tricks to try to get more people's attention, to just try to hopefully catch somebody who's feeling particularly generous today, or feel like people are giving because, well, it's the right thing to do, or I feel obligated to, or it's what I'm supposed to do. That's a terrible environment to raise money in. And of course, that's why we feel when we ask people to do something, we ask people to give, it's often why we feel a little shy about it, because we haven't really earned the right to do it yet. Because once you've done the hard work of getting people enrolled in the cause and they're excited about going to make this thing happen, they're happy to give money. They're excited to give money. It's a privilege to give money. It actually helps them become more holy because they're putting their money in the right place. So it's this great opportunity, and it's actually fun to raise money in an environment like that. It's still hard. It still takes sacrifices, but people want to make the sacrifice. And that comes back to, again, what's at stake. When things are at stake that people care about, they're willing to make a sacrifice. If something at stake that isn't at stake that they care about, then I'm not motivated to make any kind of deep sacrifice, whether it's monetary or otherwise, to make the thing happen. And so it really starts with getting clear about that. We've got a great chapter that outlines it's really a first-person story of my own parish and a big fundraising goal we had. But mostly a lot of the work that goes into a great ask is all the work that's done before it happens. It's building those relationships, it's communicating what's at stake, it's getting people excited about the cause. And then they're coming to you saying, hey, how can we make this happen faster? Because they're excited to make it happen. How can we give more? How can we do more of it? It really is possible for that to happen, but you got to go through those first steps of getting people enrolled in the cause. And that's another topic in the book as well, just focusing on enrollment versus enforcement. When you look at your group of people, are these people want to be here or do they have to be here? That's a huge distinction, because people who have to be here, yeah, good luck. Like, they're not interested in going to the next level. People who want to be here, your ministry is going to grow on its own. It's going to grow by referral. They're going to be coming to you to figure out how to make this happen faster. And so that's what we focus on trying to help you do in the book.
Well, as we wrap up here, Matt, I wanted to give you a chance to tell everybody a little bit about Flocknote, the tool that you've created to help parishes, schools, dioceses, nonprofit organizations to better communicate with their flock. That's exactly why Flocknote exists. It kind of instantiates a lot of the principles we've been talking about here. So tell us about it. Thousands of parishes use Flocknote. Why? What does it help them to do?
So it's a communication, member management, and online giving software for churches and ministries at all levels. So individual ministries, really small little individual ministries use it, 10, 20, 30 people, and entire dioceses use it on the other end with hundreds of thousands of people in it. So all different levels. We built it on the foundation of being able to reach your people. It starts with communication. It starts with being able to connect with your people. So then you can go do these other things. So just like I said at the top, the communication is like this linchpin skill as a leader that when you can communicate well, now all your other skills can be put to use that much more effectively. It's the same with your software and all your tools. When you can communicate with your people, then keeping your member database up to date, raising money, getting people registered for religious education, whatever the thing is you're trying to do, all of those get easier if you first have a really powerful way to communicate. And so we built the software that way first as well. So it's all around being able to communicate well and then be able to better achieve all of these other functions that a church or ministry needs to be able to achieve. And then, as you mentioned earlier, we partnered with Word on Fire to create Engage. So we have some great content partnerships, and a lot of people don't know, but you can give all of the content in Word on Fire's digital library to all of your parishioners. This life-changing content, you can give it to all of your parishioners through Word on Fire Engage. So I hope people will consider that as well. It's such a huge gift to give to all of your people. It's an easy way to grab content, the great content that Word on Fire is putting out from Bishop Barron and other people, and put it into an email. We make it real easy to be able to send it out. People can click and watch it. It's all integrated into it. And again, just a wonderful way to give that gift to all of your parishioners to experience that life-changing content. So that's Word on Fire Engage, flocknote.com/engage. You can find out more about that too.
Well, I'll include links to both Flocknote and Word on Fire Engage in the show notes, but the most important action item to take right now is to get your copy of Matt's new book. Again, it's called Why They Follow: Lessons in Church Communication from That One Lost Sheep. You see a picture of it there up on your screen. You can find that book at wordonfire.org/follow. Get a copy for yourself, but even better, if you work in a parish, a diocese, an organization, a ministry, get the 10-book pack and read this book together. I promise you it will change the way that you communicate and lead with your group. I really think this is going to have a major impact on the church in America. I have described the book as like a master class with Matt, who I think is one of the best communicators in the Catholic Church in America. So I don't think there's any better use of your time than spending a few hours reading and discussing this book with others at your parish. If you don't work for a parish, maybe consider just getting a 10-pack for your parish. Give a gift to your pastor or to your staff, and I think they'd really appreciate you for doing that for them. So again, check out the book, learn more at the website wordonfire.org/follow. Matt, thanks for joining us. Really appreciated your time.
It was great to be here, Brandon.
And thanks to all of you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time here at Word on Fire.